Leon could not scream, could not move, could not breathe. The air had been expelled from his lungs abruptly, and he could do nothing but agonize what seemed to be an eternity. His whole body ached, his back throbbed, his knife wounds seemed to be on fire. His heart felt like drums in his chest. His body trembled and his eyes watered. In front of him, all kinds of creatures were approaching him. Lickers were running on all fours and roaring as they approached. They were bloodied, and their claws were bigger than ever. The tyrants were more ferocious. They were no longer walking, but they were running towards him, each of them with a different mutation. But something they all had in common was the big claw that had taken over one or two of their arms. And behind him, as if it weren't enough, came the worst, William Birkin, completely transformed. His head contained long, sharp teeth. Several yellow eyes stared at Leon, although the creature's chest, what appeared to be the wings of pure muscle and bone on the Birkin's back, and made him larger and more intimidating. Leon wanted to run, wanted to get up and run away as fast as he could, but he couldn't, and the closer the creature got, the more desperate he became. The creatures reached him, and he tried to close his eyes, preparing himself to feel his body being torn apart, but he couldn't, and to his surprise, the creatures simply ignored him, passed by him as if he wasn't really there. He was confused for a few moments, but soon his confusion was replaced with an even greater despair for creatures that were actually after Claire and Sherry. The two tried to run, but it was almost impossible to get away from the creatures, and Leon was forced to watch as one of the lickers pierced Claire in the back, while one of the tyrants impaled Sherry with its huge claw. Their cries of pain and despair, the two were imprinted on Leon's mind. He couldn't even blink as he watched the scene, and tears of despair streamed down his face. Suddenly everything went black, the creatures disappeared, and the place went to almost deafening silence. He still could not move, but once again he was forced to look deep into the empty eyes of little Sherry. She had gray skin, blood in her mouth, and in her chest, a huge hole, as if her heart had been torn out. "Why did you leave?" Sherry said, her voice now cold, echoing through Leon's mind, seeming to get louder and louder as the guilt consumed his chest. The girl then threw herself down towards him, and Leon tried to scream as he felt her teeth on his neck. The blond man woke up suddenly, gasping for air as lifting up his torso off the ground, panting. His hand went instantly to his neck, realizing that he had no injury other than the knife cut. He began to blink and regain his thoughts. He was lying next to a large tree rock and camouflaged by some tall bushes. Slowly his memories came back and assorted themselves out. He sat there to recover while he let the herbal mixture take effect. He must have been more tired than he thought, or even he didn't notice when he fell asleep. His body had recovered, but his mind still didn't look like it was going to heal. Closing his eyes again and taking a deep breath, he runs his head down to the back of his neck. His confused thoughts slowly cleared up, and he clicked his tongue in disgust as he remembered the 2 lives that he had been taken. Leon opened his eyes again and looked at the wound on his abdomen. As he moved, he would still hurt, but no longer bled or hurt as much before, as it looked better than it had earlier. A sigh escaped his lips. He could never get used to those herbs. It was almost too good to be true. The wound on his forearm and neck, as well as the one in the abdomen, had also closed and seemed to be healing even faster than he thought. Curious, he soon looked up at the sky. It didn't look like he had slept for very long. It certainly didn't feel like it. Getting up somewhat slowly, he grunted as he felt his head throbbing. He hated nightmares. These were already becoming a part of his life. He wondered if he would ever be able to sleep without worrying about them. A silly hope, of course, because he knew due to his work, he could get used to waking up in the middle of the night, sweaty and panting after a nightmare. His eyes fell on the pouch around his waist, considering that a week ago he was surrounded by many people and friends, and he would say that he's already living a nightmare that every very moment. Sighing, he ran his finger over the blade of the knife in his hand before placing it around his waist. Removing his shirt that he had tied around his abdomen, he puts it back on, not caring about the blood that smeared onto his side. It was only able to hide the knife handle. He hoped it would be easier to get to other 2 vials. Without wasting any more time, he came out of this small hiding place, looking carefully around as he moved slowly. The forest seemed empty, but having taken by surprise before, he would be suspicious of anything at that moment. Turning, he began to walk towards the tower and he had spotted earlier, with luck that he'd be able to find something there. At every moment he felt a strange sensation run through his body. His chill then went up and down his spine. He felt like he was being watched from all sides, as if at any moment, something or someone was going to jump on his back and try to stick a knife in his flesh or take a chunk out of his neck. Was this what he would have had to deal with on a daily basis? The feeling that at every moment something would attack him? Keeping his guard up at all times even while he slept? If he could sleep at all. How could anyone get used to that? In fury it seemed to be almost impossible. Not soon enough he finally reached said tower. Smoke still emanated from the place, as Leon ran his eyes around carefully. The tower had been destroyed by some kind of explosion. Fire was still burning in some places, and pieces of metal were lying around the area, probably from the explosion, whatever it was. It didn't look like there was anything there, but surely that tower didn't blow itself up. Not at least some time ago. Maybe a few hours at most. That tower was still standing. With slow, careful steps, Leon began to approach, slightly bent over with his right hand, and at the angle close to where his knife was. If something appeared, he would have to act quickly, hoping that the person attacking him didn't have a weapon, or at least the creature hadn't appeared yet was a tyrant. Other than the destruction caused, there was nothing on the scene, just fire, black soil burning, and some places stained with red, probably blood. What caught the attention, however, was the blood that formed a trail. Someone had been injured but managed to escape, or someone who simply won a fight and left another person to die in the explosion. Either way, the important thing what Leon would do now. Should he follow the trail, or simply ignored it? He didn't need to think too hard. The answer was clear. It was his hesitation that made him freeze longer than necessary. He needed the other samples. That was a fact. He could follow the trail cautiously and watch the stranger from afar. If he could see the stranger had a pouch just like his, he'd be forced to act. If not, he wouldn't need to engage in combat and would just walk away without having to hurt anyone, hoping that this person wouldn't see him and go after his vial. As he took a first step follow the trail, Leon looked at the pouch again. There was nothing special about it. No code, no markings, nothing. In other words, it didn't seem to be anything important. William did not say that pouch was mandatory for the conclusion test, only the vials, which meant that he would not need to use it. And unfortunately, this made things a bit more complicated. Because if other people thought of it too, it'd be more difficult to find the vials, since he would be obliged to enter the combat with all participants he came across. His thoughts were soon abruptly interrupted when a cry for help was heard. His instincts screamed, and he soon became alert. A male voice, drawn, wary, seemed to have struggled to shout. Leon put his hand on the handle of his knife and called for help didn't seem too distant. He stood for a few moments until he heard the scream again. He knew that this could be dangerous, that if someone nearby they would also hear the scream. Whatever had happened, the man would happen to him as well. But he still hadn't forgotten why he had decided to become a cop. Despite everything, he wanted to help others. Maybe it was a mistake and stupid of him to be worried about whoever that person screamed was. Maybe it was a mistake for him to start walking at a fast pace towards the scream. But he couldn't stop it. It was in his nature. He walked in the forest, and after some walking he finally found the source of the cry for help. Ahead, a man was sitting on the ground with his back to Leon. He was slightly bent over, with his head down. He seemed to be staring at the ground, although the Bond wasn't sure. The man was still wearing clothes similar to his own, a gray blouse, equally gray pants, with shoes of the same color. Leon opened his mouth to call out to the man in the instant he saw him, but he was smarter than that. His instinct stopped him. The experiences of everything that had been through up to that point hit him hard, and he closed his mouth. This could be very well a trap. His blue eyes ran through, looking around anything suspicious. It didn't smell good. Something was wrong. His skin tingled. Leon strained his posture, controlling the urge to simply go after the man's aid. With the slow, cautious steps, he began to circle the area. His breathing was ragged, shaky even. His heart was pounding and his stomach churned with anxiety. There was a pouch beside the fallen man, a pouch that Leon suspected to be empty, probably to attract more desperate participants. Or perhaps cautious participants who were too curious to dare to approach. As he walked, Leon could notice something on the ground. There were small marks across the ground, forming that something appeared to be a circle, but not a perfect, deformed in some places. In front of these marks was an area with trees closer to the man, and the grass was a little taller than where Leon was standing. There had to be something hidden there. No, it was too odd. Anyone paying attention would know it simply smelled like a trap. So why? His thoughts were quickly quite cut short when he heard the sound of twigs snapping behind him, and Leon suddenly turned around. His eyes widened and his throat closed for an instant. For as soon as he turned, the first thing he saw was a man with a bow and arrow made out of wood with him in his sights, a few places away, hidden and tall behind the bushes. Ah, now it started to make more sense. The man didn't exactly want to kill the other competitors in the trap, but luring them would be enough. Leon tried to react. He threw his body to the side and put his arm right in front of his face. However, it was not as if he would be able to dodge the arrow, even if it was shot from a wooden bow. Nevertheless, at least, for having raised in his arm, the arrow hit him in the forearm. Leon groaned in pain and staggered a few steps. However, he recovered quickly and ran to the side, hiding behind a tree not far away. As soon as he hid, he could hear the arrow strike the trunk of the tree which he was hiding. Gritting his teeth, he looked at the arrow still stuck at his forearm. Damn it, those people just attack. They don't say anything, though. They went straight for the kill. Maybe that wasn't so bad. Well, in realization, the fact that they want to kill him, but rather because he would be forced to defend himself. He didn't want to attack anyone. He didn't want to kill anyone. But if he was attacked, he wouldn't allow himself to be killed. Taking a few deep breaths, Leon tightened the grip of his knife and stepped out from behind the tree, turning to the side quickly. The man moved along with him, moving in circular motion in the opposite direction of where Leon was running and shooting at another arrow from the blond man. This arrow was almost missed him. The former policeman would feel the arrow graze in his back. He managed to reach another tree, and his mind began to work quickly. His attacker had the advantage of distance. No matter what he did, he would be spotted. He had to do something and fast. Looking around, he noticed that to his left, the trees were lined up a bit closer together, which gave him more cover. Well, better than anything. He couldn't stand there forever. He would have to take a chance. Before he could do anything, however, he hears the sound of twigs moving overheard. As he looks up, his eyes widen as he sees the man leaning on a branch 2 or 3 trees away from where he was, and with his bow pointed directly in that direction. Leon moves away from the tree, hearing the sound of the arrow hitting the trunk again. He runs a few steps, but stops abruptly when he sees something sticking out in the ground in front of him. Another arrow. Turning, he focused his eyes on the attacker. The man seemed to aim another arrow at Leon, who shook his head, and this time counterattacked by throwing his knife. The man was taken by surprise by the sudden attack, but managed to dodge it, although he ended up losing his balance a bit, which opened a small opening for Leon to run as fast as he could so he could run towards him. The man looked at him again as he turned around, jumped off the branch. Leon watched in surprise as the man who grabbed the rope tied between the 2 trees as he fell, and soon the wooden stakes tied together plummeted from the top of the trees, and advanced quickly towards Leon, who wide-eyed abruptly stopped, running and threw himself to the side, dodging. The blonde could hear the states passing dangerously close to him at great speed, and just mentally thanked God for being able to react. However, he didn't have time to fully recover, because soon the man was already aiming at him. Leon gritted his teeth and, still on the ground, rolled to the side and dodging the arrow and slowly getting up quickly afterwards. The man began to move away as Leon approached, but not fast, as he aimed another arrow in the blonde's direction. The ex-top cop took a deep breath, and his eyes grew wide and his pupils seemed to almost dilate. The air had turned cold and everything seemed to go in slow motion. His heartbeat was still echoing through his ears. Leon saw that the man straightened his shoulders, aimed in his direction. He could tell when his attacker's eyes focused on his target. He could notice that the man had his breath moments before he released the arrow, and it was at that very moment Leon dodged, throwing his torso to the side without taking his eyes off his attacker. The arrow passed millimeters away from his chest, almost cutting through his shirt, but he didn't care. All that mattered now was the knockdown of his attacker. As long as he could avoid spilling the blood, he would. The man seemed to mumble something, his wide eyes clearly showing his disbelief. He tried to move away, but Leon was faster and soon caught up with him. The blonde landed onto the punch side of the man's face, who, despite being hit, countered by turning around and landing a spinning kick to Leon's chest, sending him 2 steps backwards. The former cop gritted his teeth, but soon recovered and advanced again, and this time the man attacked with a first high kick. However, Leon was quicker and ducked, landing a punch to the man's stomach. His opponent grunted in pain, but recovered faster than Leon fought, and soon he hit the blonde man in the elbow in the back, followed by a knee to the stomach. Leon grunted but ignored the pain. As soon as he took a step to the side, he hit an elbow to the side of the man's torso, followed by a hook of the chin, and managed a side punch that knocked his opponent down. The man sputtered a little. His back went up and down in gasping motion. He seemed to cough a few times. Leon stared at him, a little lost of what he perceived. The plan was still to knock him out, but now, with him on his knees in that situation, jumping on his back and choking him until he lost consciousness seemed to be a little more difficult than he simply landing a punch to the chin hard enough to knock him out. But he could do neither, for that was soon struck by surprise. On the side of his leg was a piece of broken branch. He groaned loudly in pain and knelt his stricken leg. Without time for him to even recover, the man stood up, grabbed the arrow still stuck in Leon's forearm and pulled it. The blond man grunted, but soon his grunt turned into a cry of pain as the man plunged a wooden arrow into the side of his torso, just below his ribs. Leon gritted his teeth as he felt the man pull the arrow again, but before he could be stabbed once more, Leon grabbed his opponent's arm, feeling the adrenaline rush through his veins, making him ignore the pain that he felt. The ex-cop countered a punch to the man's face, hitting him right in the nose. Getting up easily, he landed another punch to the side of the opponent's face, and with force, landed a kick at the tip of his right foot in the middle of the man's throat. The man gasped heavily as he was hit by a blow. Saliva splurted out of the gaping mouth, and he immediately brought his hands up to his neck, gasping for air. Leon was panting slightly, a small grimace of pain on his face as he felt blood trickle down his wound. His blue eyes scanned the man's body. He had slightly torn from blood-stained clothes. He was dirty, probably had been there for some time. Shaking his head, Leon stood beside the man that had hit him with a hard kick to the head, knocking him out. The blond man took a few steps, trying to ignore the pain, and started to search the man. As expected, he had seen nothing but that blow of bow and arrow. However, Leon didn't exactly find a weapon. He did find something better, depending on one's point of view. A grenade. A freaking grenade, Jesus. And to think that guy could have blown up on him and Leon. Well, he probably decided to save the grenade for a special occasion. It did make sense. Used correctly, that grenade could be the most lethal thing in the forest. Thinking for a moment, Leon opened his pouch and removes the green vial, placing it with the grenade, keeping the vial in his pocket. No one ever knows. His attention soon turned to a small noise that seemed to be approaching, and Leon turned abruptly, thinking it was someone else who had found him. However, Leon tilted his head to the side and arched his eyebrows in surprise. When he saw that noise, in fact, it was just a small drone. The drone circled Leon for a few moments, who had just stared at it in confusion, until the drone began to gain altitude. It got a few feet above the treetops. The drone exploded in thick green smoke. The explosion caught Leon off guard. The loud noise and sudden flash made him close his eyes tightly and had his hands to his ears, being slightly dazed and hearing a dull buzzing sound after the explosion. It didn't take long for him to recover, and after Leon moved a few steps away, wary, watchful. The green smoke seemed to have glow in the sky, similar explosions that happened far away, which caught his attention, and then in the distance, amongst the treetops, Leon could see what appeared to be purple smoke. The young cop was even more intrigued by this. What could these explosions mean? Why was it happening right on top of where he was standing? And the earpiece buzzed, causing Leon to look down in surprise. You only have 1 hour to get to the island with the free vials. Unfortunately, there is only one boat. The location is, the eye mesmerized the glow, the words carried on the winds of the smoke. To the side, the home of the mechanisms that attract life, resulting in death of sustains of life once again. In the center of your goal, covered in blue, good luck. William's voice echoed through Leon's mind, who whined in disbelief. An hour? You said the lab isn't accessible for 7 hours, Leon exclaimed, but only grunted loudly in frustration after giving no response. What could that mean? His heart began to pound again, and Leon took a deep breath, trying to calm himself. To recap, Leon said that he only had an hour to get to the island, not that he only had an hour to get to the lab. Maybe there was more of that test on the other island. No, it made sense. William would have said something, especially with that part of the lab in sight. Wait, his eyes slightly narrowed. Leon picks up the vial that was in his pockets. Vial A1 had the green color, similar to that of the smoke that still permitted in the sky. According to William, the other vials were purple and red. In the distance he could see a purple color. Leon clicked his tongue, and his eyes wide and teeth gritted in anger. Oh, you've got to be kidding me, he muttered low. So that was his way of rushing things, huh? There was a reason for those explosions, just before he warned about the remaining time? He wanted the participants to face each other at once and leave the other island by showing the location of the vials. With his heart nearly bursting out of his mouth, Leon takes the bow and arrows that the man had runs out back towards the tower from before as fast as he could. He could see in which direction the purple vials was, but not the red one. As soon as he arrived, he ignored the still hot parts of the destroyed place and quickly climbed the steps of the stairs, not completely destroyed, but too hot for him to stay there for long. When he reached a considerable height, he looked around. The smoke had mostly dissipated, but there were still barely visible particles in the air. In the purple was furthest away. The red smoke was not too far from where he was, basically in the same direction. It was that he realized that the place where he had been standing was another island. Wasn't exactly large, but it would take minutes to cross it completely. Perhaps it was another reason why William gave away those position of the vials. Rolling his eyes, he started to run back towards the place where he was before. At this point he was unharmed. A wooden bow, although with some use, wasn't exactly something that he was used to. He had to get his knife back. The blade probably fell close to the area surrounded by traps. If someone came and got it, it'd be worse. But there was also a chance that somebody was already there, waiting for the chance for the explosion to right happen over his head. He had to be quick and... Wait. No, this is wrong. He didn't have to be fast in that situation. Leon stopped running in the slow pace, slightly out of breath as his eyes ran over the ground. All and other participants were now heading towards the vials, all concerned with getting their heads on the goal, killing all those that had gotten away. But probably not all of them would think to have charade at that moment. It was almost certain that any of them would still worry about it after, only that they had free vials in possession. Eyes mesmerized by the glow. Nothing that island remotely resembled an eye. So, of course, it was something to make use of an organ. A place of observation. And what else made sense? Following by that logic was the burning tower behind it, mesmerized by the glow. In many tales and poetry books, it was mentioned how the glow of fire could be mesmerizing, and the swaying of the flames reminded him of those attentive to the natural, beautiful dance that could become fatal. Words carried to the wind like smoke. The burning tower, of course. It had to be the smoke emanating from there. Next door home to the mechanisms that attracted life, resulting in death and sustains of life once again. That didn't make much sense. Mechanisms attract life? What attracted life? Resulting in death and sustained life once again, Leon couldn't think of anything but hunting, killing to eat, death that sustained life. The mechanism that attracted animals to hunt on the island. Considering that he didn't find any animals out there, and that he was surrounded by water, all he could think of was the fishing pole. Maybe that building he had seen earlier, in the center that would be of the boat. Well, that's what he had. Looking at the surrounding forest once more, Leon changes directions and begins to run to the forest. The tower was to the right, and the building he had seen when he was on that hill, just a few hundred meters to the left. So if he understood everything correctly, he would have to find the boat. As he ran, Leon could see this perpetual vision becoming something moving behind him. He stopped suddenly and took cover behind a tree. Leaning his body slightly to the side, he watched another participant make his way forward to where the explosion had happened. He was walking at a fast pace, slightly bent over, and running his eyes almost all the time. Leon was luckily far away, surrounded by several trees that served as camouflage. Waiting patiently for the man to move away, the blonde continued to stare at him. He couldn't help but sigh when he saw this guy carried a machete in his hand. The question of all weapons worked for the same way as the vials? Did the certain participants start with the vial, while the others started with the melee weapons? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe they were just lucky enough to find them in the forest, since the weapon man Leon had faced earlier had the bow and arrows made of wood. Shaking his head, he continues on his way as the man gets far away. The place further away than he had thought, but after minutes of running, he finally arrived at the beach. Gasping for breath, Leon turns back, running his eyes through the forest. He could still see smoke emanating from the burning tower, and to his delight, he heard nothing. No sound of a fight, or that someone had followed him. Good. Turning again, he runs his eyes around the place. There were a few containers around, each with a different color. "Your gold covered in blue," he muttered, the same words as William, running his eyes down the beach. So a blue container. At a quick pace he begins to wander around the beach. The sound of the ocean waves soothed him, all things considered, but the place seemed normal. The warm sand on his feet even gave him a good feeling of the middle of all that shit. A feeling that was almost swallowed by the bad ones. It was a bit hard to imagine that just a few days ago he was in Raccoon. His body still hadn't fully recovered. That bite mark on his arm had healed. Yes, but it still seemed to send spasms of pain at times. So did the liquor claw mark on his chest. He had spent a long time just trying to ignore it. The silence of the place was almost deafening. The next thing he knew, he had reached the last container, and that's when desperation returned, making his mind focus on the now and forget every strange sensations in his body. No blue container, he muttered to himself, and turning around he ran all the way, passing all in front of the containers at once. Nothing. Slipping his tongue out in frustration, he starts opening the containers, one by one getting more and more frustrated with each empty container he had found, until the container was finished, and panting, he stared at the empty interior in front of him. Damn it! He wanted to scream, his hands clenched into fists. Was he in the wrong place? He couldn't be. There were containers of many colors, green, orange, red, but no blue. Didn't he interpret the puzzle wrong? No. The realization clicked in his mind, and his eyes soon turned to the sea. Calm, small waves with a light breeze, and the warm sun seemed to reflect on the intense blue water. The boat is underwater, he muttered, a confirmation to himself. That was the only thing that made sense, right? How could the hell would get on the boat that was supposedly underwater? By swimming? No. After all, it did seem that way. Nobody could pull up a boat like that without the proper equipment. The destroyed building, he muttered again, gritting his teeth for the lost time and trying to run towards the construction that he had seen earlier. As if his mind didn't fail him, he was in the right direction. He just didn't expect that as soon as he got closer, he would be met by another man. A few meters away from the destroyed building, he saw a man look at him. Surprised, maybe he didn't expect anyone there either. The man had dark skin, short black hair with brown eyes. He was tall and had a larger physique than Leon. He soon began to move at a slow pace, looking at Leon attentively as he gripped the handle of the axe. Leon clicked his tongue and picked up his bow and arrow, aiming towards the man. The ex-cop never shot with a bow before. He had no idea if he was doing it the right way, but couldn't be that hard, right? The man stopped for a moment, still staring blankly at Leon, until the man smiled, almost an arrogant smile. Holding that way, you wouldn't be able to hit anything, the man said. Immediately advanced towards Leon with the axe in hand. The blond man released the arrow, and just as the man said, he had missed. The arrow was not shot as hard, but he had not held the bow steady enough to shoot straight, missing it almost embarrassingly bad. Leon gritted his teeth and he saw the man already taking a few steps ahead of him, and quickly he ducks down, throws the body to the side, and tries to rip off his opponent. However, the man, despite a missed blow, quickly moved away, and immediately after attacked again. He was fast. The man had tried a horizontal attack with the axe, but Leon dodged it and tried to counter with a punch. But it was clear that the man was still well trained and more skilled than the blonde was. However, despite his training, he was still a cop. Throwing his torso to the side, the man punches Leon under the blonde's own arm, followed by a left hook, and strong enough to make the ex-cop feel dizzy for a few moments, leaving him invulnerable to the attacks. The man landed a kick to Leon's stomach, followed by another punch to the face, causing the blonde man to fall to the ground. Leon gasped heavily as he was panting, his vision slightly blurred, and blood splurting from his mouth. That pouch, one of the vials, I presume? The man asked, walking around Leon with some composure. The blonde man moved his arm slowly downward. He was on his stomach, and the man did not see that he put his hand on inside his pouch, holding the grenade. The man then with his foot pushed Leon, caused him to roll over and lay on his back on the ground. As soon as he did, he raised an axe to kill the blonde, whose eyes widened his. "Wait! I'll give you the pouch!" he shouted, putting a hand in front of his face, his tired voice failing on him at a few words. He pulled the pin. The man did not stop his attack, and Leon was forced to dodge to the side. The man grunted in irritation and moved closer once more. "You're going to die anyway," the man said, raising his axe. "I know." Leon took a deep breath, without looking away. But not here. Removing his pouch, he tossed it towards the man and ran backwards as fast as he could. The man looked in surprise for a few moments and stared at the pouch after catching it. It didn't make sense, so no one would have to do something like that. Suspicious, he tries to open the pouch, but after realizing it was a grenade, he did nothing. It was too late. The grenade exploded. Leon hides behind a nearby tree when the explosion happened, and he just let his eyes focus on the forest, still panting, thinking about what he had just done. It was getting easier, not the rest, not that horrible feeling of having killed, no. He didn't like it, but probably would never enjoy taking a life. But the thought of killing, the act of doing it, was already almost settling to his mind and body. Well, apparently that was the past time for him to accept that. Closing his eyes tightly, he takes a deep breath and turns around. His eyes focus on the destruction caused by the grenade. The ground then turned black, blood stained in the ground, and what was left of the man's body lay disfigured in the dirt a few meters from where he had stood before. As much as the scene made him want to vomit, he couldn't leave the remains of the body laying there. It would serve him as a warning to anyone else who had arrived at that place, and that would make whoever arrived there be on alert. Bitterly, Leon takes what's left of the man's body and drags it to the forest, leaving only a few traces of blood on the ground. Well, there was nothing much he could do about it. Shaking his head, Leon enters the destroyed building. It looked like a normal house, with destroyed walls and ceiling, until he walked to the back, where he found a door leading to the long corridor. After following the corridor, with cautious steps and descending to some stairs, he arrived at the boat at the garage. The door was open, but there was no boat. The blue eyes of the ex-cop focused on for a few moments on the fishing rods on the wall. It was there. It had to be. But where exactly? Leon began to scan the place, walking along the wooden platform with quick, what seemed to be restless steps. It was then that, on the switch beside the garage door, he noticed that there were more buttons than normal. He pressed one of the light buttons, and he couldn't help but be surprised when he saw the light came on in the garage, but underwater. Leaning his body forward, he smiles slightly as he sees that below was another room with an iron door, lit by a single lamp. Standing up again, Leon pressed his button close enough to the gate, and as soon as he did, the water began to drain out of the room. The gates closed, blocking the water coming in from the outside, while at the same time another entrance drained the water inside. A ladder descended into the side of the iron gate, and Leon shook his head slightly. All he needed to do now was to get 2 other vials. He didn't have to go after them, although all he had to do was wait, and with that he set some traps out there. Quickly, Leon left the house and ran his eyes through the forest. No one around apparently, but that would soon change. Hurrying, he walked over towards where the grenade explosion happened and picked up the axe that was on the ground, placing it on his belt. Then he picked up his bow and arrow, although in the experience, it would still be useful. After this, he walked into the vines for wood. There was not much there, but the element of surprise would be his advantage. Time was passing quickly. He entered the house again and searched the destroyed rooms, shaking his head when he found a rope. All he needed. Back outside, Leon did his best to cover the entire front door with dry leaves. With the axe, he begins to take some wood splinters from a log, making it round. In a strategic place, he attaches the branch to the ground and makes a small area with the trigger, covering the area with leaves soon after. If someone steps on the trigger, the branch will be triggered by the rope. In a brutal way, the branch will be lifted and hit whoever it was in the way. He was thankful that he had spent so much time with his father and never just thought he would use a hunting trap on humans.